Title: Stopping at 7-Eleven. The highway stretched endlessly before me, a ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the horizon beneath the muted glow of the moon. It was well past midnight, and fatigue weighed heavily on my eyelids as I navigated the deserted road. The rhythmic hum of the engine and the monotony of the journey threatened to lull me into a drowsy stupor. The headlights cut through the darkness, revealing a lone figure standing at the side of the road. A hitchhiker, their silhouette hunched beneath the weight of the night. A twinge of sympathy tugged at me, and against my better judgment, I decided to pull over. The hitchhiker approached, face obscured by the hood of a tattered jacket. They seemed shrouded in an air of desolation, their eyes reflecting the dim glow of the dashboard as they muttered gratitude for the ride. As we drove, a silence settled between us, a silence that seemed to amplify the emptiness of the highway. The hitchhiker's gaze was distant, and a sense of unease began to unfurl in the confined space of the car. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the atmosphere grew increasingly heavy. In the distance, a neon sign emerged through the darkness, the familiar glow of a 7-Eleven, a beacon of respite on this desolate highway. I suggested stopping for a break, hoping that a hot cup of coffee might shake off the eerie atmosphere that had settled in the car. The 7-Eleven stood like an oasis, its fluorescent lights cutting through the night. The hitchhiker hesitated, their reluctance palpable, but they eventually followed me into the store. The aisles were bathed in a sterile glow, and the low hum of refrigerators provided a disconcerting soundtrack to our late-night visit. As I poured coffee into a paper cup, I noticed the hitchhiker's reflection in the store's security mirrors, an unsettling specter in the sterile environment. Their eyes bore into mine with a haunting intensity, and a sense of dread gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. We sat at a dimly lit table, the silence between us punctuated only by the occasional flicker of the overhead lights. The hitchhiker's gaze remained fixed on me, and a growing paranoia took root. I began to question the wisdom of bringing a stranger into this eerie 7-Eleven in the dead of night. The atmosphere became charged, as if the very air harbored a malevolent force. The flickering lights cast disorienting shadows, and the hitchhiker's features seemed to warp and contort with each passing moment. A realization gripped me. Their presence was a harbinger of something unnatural, something that defied the boundaries of the mundane. Suddenly, the hitchhiker's demeanor shifted. Their eyes gleamed with an otherworldly malevolence as they uttered cryptic words, a sinister incantation that resonated with an unearthly energy. The walls seemed to close in, and the 7-Eleven transformed into a nightmarish labyrinth of shadows. Panicked, I stumbled backward, but the door had vanished. The sterile aisles had morphed into a surreal realm, a distorted reflection of the convenience store I thought I knew. The hitchhiker, now a spectral figure, beckoned me into the twisted reality that had replaced the ordinary 7-Eleven. As I ventured further into the nightmarish landscape, the highway and the car faded into obscurity. The hitchhiker, a malevolent guide, led me through a labyrinth of distorted corridors and shifting shadows. Whispers echoed, indistinct and unsettling, as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling. I awoke on the side of the highway, the first light of dawn painting the ski in mooted hues. The car idled nearby, a stark contrast to the nightmarish journey I had experienced. The 7-Eleven, now a distant speck on the horizon, seemed to flicker with an otherworldly energy. The hitchhiker was gone, leaving behind an unsettling sense of disorientation. The highway stretched endlessly before me, and as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the convenience store, once a beacon of respite, had become a portal to a realm where the ordinary and the supernatural collided, a haunting reminder that some encounters on the desolate highways could lead to an inexplicable journey beyond the boundaries of reality. Title: Ex-Girlfriend. The dull hum of the 7-Eleven's refrigerators provided a backdrop as I navigated the aisles, the fluorescent lights casting an artificial glow on the familiar shelves of snacks and beverages. It was a routine late-night stop, an attempt to shake off the weariness of a long day. Little did I know that the mundane ritual would soon spiral into a nightmarish confrontation. As I stood at the counter, waiting to pay for my purchases, the atmosphere in the store shifted. A chill crawled up my spine, and when I turned, there she was, Rebecca, my ex-girlfriend, standing by the slushy machine. Her presence was unexpected and unwelcome, like an apparition from a buried past. "Long time no see," she greeted, her voice dripping with a sickly sweetness that set me on edge. I forced a smile, the memories of our tumultuous relationship flooding back. The breakup had been messy, and I had made a conscious effort to sever ties and move on. But here she was, an unwelcome specter in the aisles of the 7-Eleven. Trying to diffuse the tension, I exchanged brief pleasantries, but Rebecca's gaze held an unsettling intensity. It was as if she had something to say, something that lingered in the shadows between us. The flickering lights seemed to dance to an eerie rhythm, amplifying the surreal encounter. As I made my way towards the exit, Rebecca followed, her presence an ominous shadow at my heels. Unease settled in, and my instincts screamed at me to escape this unsettling reunion. The cold night air greeted me as I stepped outside, but Rebecca lingered on the threshold, her eyes locked onto mine. "I've missed you," she whispered, the words sending a shiver down my spine. Before I could respond, her demeanor shifted. The sweet facade crumbled, and a malevolent gleam replaced the unsettling sweetness in her eyes. Panic seized me as I realized this encounter had taken a darker turn. I quickened my pace, desperate to distance myself from the haunting presence of my ex. But she pursued, her steps echoing in the quiet night. Fear gnawed at my resolve, and the realization struck that I needed help. Fumbling for my phone, I dialed 911, explaining the bizarre situation unfolding outside the 7-Eleven. As I spoke to the dispatcher, Rebecca's demeanor intensified. She advanced with purpose, her words now a string of incoherent threats. The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way, but the distance between us and the 7-Eleven seemed to stretch endlessly. In the eerie silence that followed, the distant wail of sirens broke through. Relief washed over me as the police arrived, their presence a stark contrast to the looming threat of my ex. Rebecca, now unhinged, ranted and raved as the officers intervened, restraining her and leading her away. As the patrol car pulled away, I stood outside the 7-Eleven, still reeling from the surreal encounter. The night had transformed from routine to a chilling ordeal. The flickering lights and empty aisles now etched with the lingering presence of a disturbing past. The 7-Eleven, once a mundane refuge for late-night snacks, had become a battleground where the ordinary and the unsettling collided. The echoes of that night would forever linger in the aisles, a reminder that sometimes the shadows of the past can resurface in the most unexpected places. Title: Hiding a Mysterious Man. The 7-Eleven stood like a solitary beacon in the muted glow of the streetlights, and I found solace in its familiar aisles during the late hours. The hum of refrigerators and the soft jingle of the entrance bell created a semblance of normalcy as I perused the shelves, searching for a snack to appease the hunger gnawing at my stomach. As I approached the counter, a man burst through the entrance, panic etched across his face. His disheveled appearance and wild eyes immediately set off alarms in my mind. He glanced over his shoulder before fixing his gaze on me, a stranger caught in the web of his desperation. "Please, you have to help me. They're after me," he pleaded, his voice a desperate whisper. I hesitated, caught off guard by the urgency in his tone. Before I could respond, he thrust a crumpled wad of bills towards me, his eyes pleading for complicity in his escape. The store's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance with the unfolding drama. "I just need a place to hide for a while. The cops won't understand," he insisted, the urgency in his voice escalating. Fear trickled down my spine, and my instincts warred within me. I glanced towards the entrance, half expecting a squad of police officers to storm in at any moment. The man's desperation was palpable, and against my better judgment, I gestured for him to follow me towards the back of the store. The storage room was a cramped space filled with cardboard boxes and the lingering scent of cleaning supplies. As the man huddled in the corner, I couldn't shake the sense of being entangled in something far more sinister than a late-night snack run. The minutes stretched into an agonizing silence, the distant sounds of the city muffled by the walls of the 7-Eleven. I strained to listen for any indication of police presence, but was met only with the hum of the refrigerators. As the tension in the storage room became almost unbearable, the man's eyes darted towards the door, his expression a mix of anticipation and fear. Just as the first rays of doubt crept into my mind, the store's entrance bell jingled softly, and the door swung open. 2 police officers entered, their authoritative presence filling the space. Panic seized me, and I exchanged a furtive glance with the man hiding in the corner. The officers approached the counter, their eyes scanning the store. "Have you seen anyone suspicious around here?" one of them inquired, his gaze fixed on mine. My heart raced, but I managed to stammer out a feeble denial. The officers continued their search, the tension in the air thickening with each passing second. As they neared the storage room, the man pressed himself further into the shadows, his breath caught in a silent plea for concealment. The officers lingered for a moment longer before deciding to leave. The door closed behind them, leaving the store in an uneasy quiet. The man emerged from his hiding place, gratitude and relief etched across his face. "Thank you. I owe you more than you know," he whispered, before vanishing into the night. As the distant wail of sirens faded, I stood alone in the 7-Eleven, the encounter leaving behind an unsettling residue. The store, once a mundane refuge, had become a clandestine sanctuary for a man on the run, and the echoes of that desperate plea lingered in the aisles like an unresolved whisper. The 7-Eleven, bathed in the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, held its secrets close, a witness to a night where ordinary choices collided with the clandestine world beyond its walls. And as I left, the subtle hum of the refrigerators seemed to carry the weight of the night's clandestine drama, a chilling reminder that sometimes the line between the ordinary and the extraordinary is thinner than the flickering light of a late-night convenience store. Title: Night Shift Robbery. The 7-Eleven stood bathed in the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, a familiar oasis in the quiet of the night. I, a weary traveler, sought refuge in its aisles, the low hum of refrigerators, a comforting hum in the solitude of the early morning hours. As I perused the shelves for a quick snack, a chill ran down my spine, a gut feeling that something was amiss. The entrance bell jingled softly, and I glanced over my shoulder to find a figure lurking in the shadows. His face was concealed by a hood, and the glint of metal caught my eye, the unmistakable gleam of a gun. Panic clenched at my chest as he stepped forward, the harsh lines of his face etched in the dim light. His voice, a menacing whisper, shattered the silence. "Empty the register now." Fear rendered me momentarily speechless, my hands fumbling to comply with the demand. The air seemed to thicken, and the fluorescent lights flickered as if protesting the impending darkness that loomed over the convenience store. As I handed over the cash, his eyes, cold and calculating, never left mine. The barrel of the gun seemed to magnify with every passing second, a menacing presence that held me captive in the eerie stillness. The store, once a haven, transformed into a battleground where the ordinary and the horrifying converged. But then, a flicker of defiance ignited within me, a spark that fueled a desperate resolve to survive this nightmarish encounter. In the briefest of moments, a plan formed, a desperate attempt to escape the clutches of the gun-wielding stranger. As I handed over the last of the cash, a distraction unfolded. The distant wail of sirens echoed through the night, a symphony of impending rescue. The man's grip on the gun faltered, his attention momentarily diverted to the approaching threat. Seizing the opportunity, I lunged towards the exit, my heart pounding in my ears. The store's entrance bell jingled as I burst into the cold night air, the adrenaline-fueled sprint carrying me to the safety of the outside world. The stranger, now trapped between the looming threat of law enforcement and the fleeing victim, faced a dilemma of his own. Panic painted his face as he disappeared into the shadows, the fleeting promise of escape slipping through his fingers. I stumbled through the parking lot, breathless and shaken, until the distant wail of sirens enveloped me in a protective embrace. The police arrived, their authoritative presence sweeping through the 7-Eleven like a cleansing force. As I recounted the harrowing encounter to the officers, the gravity of the situation settled in. The convenience store, once a mundane refuge, had become a battleground where survival meant navigating the thin line between victim and victor. The night concluded with the arrest of the would-be robber, his menacing presence forever etched in my memory. The 7-Eleven, bathed in the harsh glow of daylight, resumed its role as a beacon of convenience. Yet the echoes of that fateful night lingered, a stark reminder that even in the most ordinary places, the thin veil of safety could be shattered in an instant, leaving behind the haunting residue of a brush with the unimaginable. Title: The Weird Homeless Man. The 7-Eleven, bathed in the sterile light of flickering fluorescent tubes, stood as a nocturnal refuge against the eerie quiet of the night. Exhausted, I sought respite within its familiar aisles, the low hum of refrigerators providing a monotonous soundtrack to the solitude. As I perused the shelves for a late-night snack, a sudden shiver danced down my spine. My gaze landed on a homeless man in the corner, his weathered face hidden beneath a tangle of matted hair and layers of dirt-streaked clothing. His eyes, though, pierced through the darkness with an unsettling intensity. A silent unease settled in as I felt his gaze follow my every move. I dismissed the discomfort, attributing it to the weariness that clouded my senses. However, as I approached the counter to pay for my items, the homeless man shuffled towards me, his footsteps echoing like an ominous drumbeat. "Hey, you," he rasped, his voice a gravelly whisper that sent a chill through my veins. I nodded politely, attempting to mask the unease gnawing at my consciousness. The cashier completed the transaction, and as I turned to leave, the homeless man blocked my path. His eyes gleamed with an unsettling malevolence, and a predatory smile stretched across his grizzled face. In a guttural growl, he uttered words that sent a shiver down my spine. "I've been waiting for you, and now it's time." My heart raced as I attempted to sidestep him, my senses on high alert. The once familiar aisles of the 7-Eleven now seemed like a labyrinth closing in around me. Panic set in when I realized that I was alone with this ominous figure, a potential threat lurking in the sterile confines of the convenience store. The homeless man's intentions became clear as he produced a rusted blade from the folds of his ragged clothing. The flickering lights overhead cast eerie shadows, distorting his silhouette into a grotesque specter. Fear gripped me, and the realization dawned that I was trapped in a nightmare with a predator who saw me as prey. Without a moment's hesitation, I sprinted towards the exit, the homeless man's menacing laughter echoing behind me. The automatic doors swung open, releasing me into the cold embrace of the night. My frantic footsteps echoed through the desolate streets as I fled the haunting threat that lurked within the 7-Eleven. Desperation fueled my escape as I flagged down a passing car, the driver's bewildered gaze meeting mine. I pleaded for help, my breathless words tumbling out in a jumble. The driver, sensing the urgency in my voice, offered refuge within the safety of the vehicle. As we drove away from the ominous glow of the convenience store, I spared a glance back, half expecting to see the homeless man's malevolent silhouette in pursuit. The 7-Eleven, once a mundane haven, had transformed into a nightmarish landscape where the line between safety and peril blurred. The encounter left scars etched into the fabric of my memory, a chilling reminder that even in the most ordinary of places, darkness could manifest, and the shadows within the familiar could harbor unimaginable horrors.